We're live. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. Hotep. Namaste. Jambo. Ashe. Shalom. Shalom. All the greetings of love and light to the darkest minds of the light. I am Napashada, and I am joined with my friend at Dodge, the author of one of my very controversial book and one of my favorites, A History of the Goddess, from the Ice Age to the Bible. I don't think we could stop it. I don't think we should. Yes, let me put you on the big screen so everybody can see this book. Please get this book. I'm sure it's well, I know it's on Amazon, but you also have some links that you can share.
Yeah, if you go to the website there, lostgoddess.io, or I've got a Substack, edwarddodge.substack.com. Anyway,
Yes.
Nepal, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, peace to
Very
you.
nice.
Yes, thank you. And I'm so happy you're here. Sick. It's
Thank God
from
and his mother.
Say it again.
Said thank God and his mother.
Thank God and his mother and his wife.
And his wife.
God, we're going to get into some of that. So I have to walk. I'm going to go all the way to the beginning because, as I was telling Ed, I've interviewed him on Esoteric Thoughts. I interviewed him on Cam Up. I've interviewed him on House of Consciousness, but I've never interviewed him on the R.I.S E channel. Reality is Simulated Existence, by the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So I get to interview you, and I want to start from the beginning. You're so good at breaking this down and having this conversation about the femininity of God and also the origin of just worship, what worship we know about today. I did want to say, it's from the Ice Age to the Bible, but arguably it's definitely beyond the Bible, right? Or no?
No, I think, look, I literally believe in God, and I literally have come around to figuring out the mother and the divine mother and who she really is, and that she's just as real as God is, and helped me make sense of God coming out of growing up Christian, but then like leaving the church because stuff just didn't really make sense. But I was never an atheist, and I was always into comparative religion, and I was influenced by Hindus, like from my family background. So I don't, the Hindu stuff has like always been a part of my story. So, I got interested in like mystical, like East meets West kind of themes, ever since, I was in my 20s. But it was later on, a couple of years ago, when I was, I kind of stumbled into the story about R.I.S.E in the Old Testament, and that the modern scholars are saying she's the wife of God. They dug up all this archaeology and all today's academics who are studying the archaeology of ancient Israel, it's totally accepted in today's academics that God had a wife and that Yahweh and Asherah were a couple, and this has been for like 30 years now, but I'd never learned that. I never heard that in church. I'd never heard that anywhere. It's just the academics talking to themselves. It's like it's not gotten out into the broader culture, and I just totally blew my mind. I was like, how can God have a wife? That doesn't even make sense. It like hurts my brain to even imagine like what that's supposed to mean. Like I had a basic normal Christian perspective on what God is, omnipotent, unlimited. So there's no space. If God is omnipotent and unlimited, then there's no space for like a partner, right? I mean, the Muslims are very clear, like Allah rules with no partner. They say that very, very explicitly, like no partner. So like how can have a partner and where to come from? And so I got interested in the story of Asherah in the Old Testament, because then, then I went back to relook at the Bible for the first time in a long time. And I grew up reading in Sunday school, but I'd never heard of Asherah or paid any attention to these goddesses. Mm-hmm. And I just stumbled into the rabbit hole. Like, it's just this most incredible story. And it like totally reverse engineers the whole Old Testament story, like, well, the first temple specifically, which is historical, like when they were actually there. And, because there was a first temple, and it just took me down this rabbit hole trying to figure out the mother, and ultimately what I figured out, sort of long story short, is it starts with Mother Earth. It's the mother. The mother is the material world, and father is immaterial. That's ultimately what we learn: mind and matter. So regardless of your opinion of God, everyone agrees that you can't touch God, can't see God. God does not exist on the material plane of reality. That's why the atheists say he doesn't exist. We can all agree God is immaterial. The Father, the Heavenly Father, God of the Bible, is immaterial. Can't touch him. But the
Yes.
mother is the material world. The mother is everything you touch, the totality of material existence. That is the mother. And there's this whole dynamic, deep philosophy to it that's been around for a long time. That was the most popular religion. And then they have this big reformation. It's the heart of popular culture. And there's a big reformation. They throw it out. We arrive at monotheism by subtraction. And then exactly, the mother was worshipped first. And then we don't talk about her anymore. They try to pretend like that she never existed. And so we're very divorced from her. I talk about this. The book is that it's telling that the Old Testament telling the story, telling the story of the divorce of God from the mother, and that's how we arrive at monotheism. But the mother never went away. She's still here. The pagans never stopped worshiping her. All the Native Americans all understand her in one way or another. But it's Mother Earth and Heavenly Father. And the Heavenly Father is immaterial. The mother is the material world. And then the Hindus really have that. That is like their basic understanding of how the universe works. It's mind and matter. They taught in the East, and for the Hindus, the consciousness is not stuck inside your brain. In the West, we're taught that our consciousness is just inside our skull as a product of our brain, and it's just locked in here. But that's not how other parts of the world see the universe. They see consciousness as being everywhere, external, and that what we're doing is like tuning it in with some antenna and a little flesh computer to give us this experience inside our head. But like really the consciousness is external, and consciousness so mind and matter are coexistent and eternal, and then but understanding the material world is the mother, and that then there's this theology to it that's circular, and it's all about circularity and the cycle of life. And that's the key thing, is circularity versus linearity, and the material world. Then also that all the goddesses that you've ever heard of are all just fractions of this one source goddess. So you can take all the goddesses from every culture, and they're all like the light coming out of a prism. Like they're all part of the one source goddess, which the Hindus call Shakti. Like this is Hindu theology about Shakti. They call her Shakti. In Hinduism, so Shiva and Shakti go together. And so she's the material world, and it's circular, and then you get the triple goddess and all this stuff. Anyway, I can pause for a second. If you got a question, or instead of just me.
No, it's great. And I just want to add about the material. Even the word matter is its mother,
right. You were the one who told that to me, and I say that now all the time, and you made that point to me, so I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, mother and matter have the same root word, the same word in Latin.
So there's so much, and I'm so glad. I just want to take take my time and savor. So there's some information that I found out that I thought of you when I was it never fails. I'm live right now, so I think I'm being looked at. And okay, I can't. Okay, where was I? There's some information I saw recently, some science, and some history, and I went back and looked at it, and let me just break it down. There was a bottleneck back in the Neolithic era, like the time in like Europe, Asia, but it only affected males. And they noticed that the mitochondrial DNA there was no problem with the female population, but the male population reduced by like 95%. And I'm kind of coming in the middle of this because I didn't start from the beginning where you can tell
there's a population drop off of males during the Neolithic.
Yes. 95%. I even went and looked it up again so I could say it to you. Let me get the statistics. So we'll source it out. This isn't source up or shut up. So 3.9 billion males. This is a few thousand years ago, Neolithic time.
Well, the Neolithic is before the Bronze Age, when they're still just living in settlements and there's no warfare yet. Because I talk a lot about the transition from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age.
And that's why I'm setting this up for you, because you do.
All right.
It's so phenomenal that so many males were just like gone, and they attributed it. I say they, I mean the researchers, anthropologists. They attributed it to violence. So now I'm going to throw you that alley-oop because you touch on this a lot. Please get the book, y'all.
Yeah.
And
So my
also,
whole theory is that that the default family structure of humanity, going back, where humans have been around like 2 million years, a million years we've been using fire and spears, and then about 50,000 years ago, something happened, and they started doing art, culture. They started doing ritual burials, cave paintings. Dog. Sorry, I got the dog here. Say hi, Charlie.
yeah. Hi, doggy.
There's Charlie. He's bothering me. Go away.
And I remember the history. It's great. You rescue animals. Yes, go get
he's
your
a street dog from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so awesome.
Anyway, then the Neolithic happens around. Something happens at the end of the Ice Age. I think it's a cataclysm. I think we're probably struck by meteors. I'm very into that whole theory. And that's the Younger Dryas. And then out of that, there's a total cataclysm, like a mass extinction event. And then we cut into and then the Neolithic starts around 10,000 years ago. And that's when the temperatures stabilize and people start settling down and doing planting and start setting up the first villages and transition from hunter-gatherers to having the first villages. But nobody really knows why. Like, what was the spark of that to like start doing that? Because we know they started growing grains, and there's a debate. It's a very interesting debate. Is whether did they settle? What were they using the grains for? Were they making bread or were they making beer? And
I want to talk about that.
Debate. So I'm actually firmly convinced that they were making beer. That the hunter gatherers were not hungry for food. There's plenty of food. Like, you don't have to work that hard. Like there's no reason to settle down to make bread. Like, that's a pain in the ass.
Oh my gosh.
To make beer is different, because beer, like, that's socializing, you're partying, and then leads to sex, and basically sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll was the spark of civilization back in the dawn of the Neolithic, that they were making beer, they were having parties, they were enjoying themselves, and the villages were fun. Like, people enjoyed living there, and they're all totally mother goddess worshiping, mother nature. It's all about, and the whole like framework of their entire perspective is around the mother, but also it's matriarchal family structures. This is really important too. So you track when they were tracking their family lines to the mothers, and so the women are not sexually constrained, and so because patriarchy just like comes along way later. For most of human history, it's matriarchal, and women's sex lives are unconstrained, which is key.
Right. And let me jump in, because this is for you to bring up the beer. I did a documentary in 2015 about beer. I mean, not beer. Well, bread, milk, and
these dogs. I'm listening.
Yeah, go ahead. So I'll talk to the audience. Please hit the like button. Thank you, Tahuti. I see you all in there. Peace to everybody. Thank you for joining. If you're new to my channel, Peace Revelation X. I hope you came over to my channel, because I ended it on the other channel because we're trying to, for political reasons, keep that channel clear. So it's on the R.I.S.E channel. But anyway, you're back. So I did a documentary on milk, bread, and blood. But the bread, I went into the production of beer because, there's a hymn to, oh my God, is it Inky? There's a hymn to the god, I think it's Inky, where they show, it's a whole beer.
Consumer.
Yeah, it's from Sumer. And then we've got in Egypt, in Kemet, that was like the beverage of choice. And isn't that interesting that even in America, it's a beverage of choice, like,
I think we've been drinking beer like all along. We never stopped. It's just been, it's so deeply rooted in human character. Beer is all right, man.
And bread is referred to in a lot of different religions. The Eucharist with Catholicism, the bread. Jesus is the bread, the loaves of bread. So bread is very, very. It is a sacrament. I would say it's like a sacrament, right? So not to get off track, I gotta bring you back on and do another video.
Not much I have to say about that, but
what? Say it.
No. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you said you have something to say about the beer.
I said that's about all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Beer. I just think I haven't studied it in any more detail in terms of.
I got to talk to you about that, because the beer, even not just not just Sumer, Kemet, Sekhmet. This we'll go back into the goddess.
Yeah, no, Sekhmet, where I was just telling somebody that story because like Sekhmet is like Kali, and she's the unstoppable, most powerful force and devours everything and destroys everybody. And in those that famous Egyptian story, Kemet story, um, you can't stop her. She's an unstoppable force. The best you can do is like distract her or placate her or like get her mind on something else. She was gonna have sex with her in that picture, but in Egypt they give her beer and they make it, they dye it red so she thinks it's
Yeah, it's like
blood,
blood.
but actually it's beer, and they get her drunk, and that calms her down.
You know, I found that in the Bible, that a reference to that in Numbers. I
What's the
can
reference?
um Okay, so when there's a part of the Bible where the king of Moab wants to have this sorcerer, this guy, this prophet slash sorcerer Balaam curse the Israelites because they're like, oh gosh, that also goes into the neighbor thing. Having neighbors in ancient times was a bad thing. Nobody wanted neighbors because they knew, you know what I mean? They're like, they're gonna take over. So when Moab, the king of Moab, sees the Israelites come in, it's in the book of Numbers. He's like, oh no, heck no. Balaam, curse them. But Balaam is like, I can't curse Israel. So he goes into like all of this speech about Israel. And he says, Israel is a couching lion. But the translation in the King James Version, they changed it. It's lioness. And then it talks about that cannot be satiated, basically cannot be satisfied until the blood. I'm going to get the scripture, but basically that's the Sekhmet. It says lioness in the original text, but it was changed.
Really? It
Ed.
says lioness in the original text?
Yes, yes, it does in the Bible.
Because
in the
like
Bible.
I use BibleHub.com, and I'll just word search, and you can search the Hebrew and stuff. It's like it's really fast. It's a great tool. That's how I did all my digital, that's how I did all my research.
Yeah, you
I'm
got to
not like
use the blue letter too, though. The Strongs. It
that's
gives you
all in BibleHub.com.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
think so. Yeah,
they got
yeah,
like
it is.
digital
It is.
tools, like everything's in there, and so you can like you can cross reference really easily. And so
Right.
like I mean that's how I learned all the Asherah stuff was just word search for Asherah basically, and the Kadesha priestesses, and then Astarte. So there's like three goddesses that are there, but only two that are in the text, which are Asherah and Astarte. Astarte being Venus, Ishtar. She's the same as Ishtar and Inanna, Astarte is, and that's who King Solomon worships. She's the maiden, the mother maiden death. So she's the maiden, and Venus. All that always goes with Venus. So she's the most popular goddess. The maiden's always the most popular one. In modern day India, that's Durga. Same triple goddess, repeats all the way through. All right, here's the whole part of the theory for you. So in the Old Testament, my whole argument is that the triple goddess is the most important motif. Goes back to it's originally the daughters of Ra in Kemet. It's Hathor, Bastet, and Sekhmet are the first one. The second one is Asherah, Astarte, and Anat for the Canaanites, Israelites. But Anat's never mentioned in the Bible. It's very conspicuous that they don't name her because they do name Asherah and Astarte, but only to insult them and like kick them out. But Anat, they never even mentioned. They don't even give her a name because to name her would to identify her, and Anat's more powerful than God, so they had to like leave her out. Like, it's part of my argument. But they're also in the Quran. In the satanic verses, they mention Alat, Uzzah, and Manat. Alat's like Allah, and Manat like Anat, and then Uzzah is the maiden. She's the Venus goddess. Then modern day Hinduism, you've got Parvati, Durga, and Kali that all go with Shiva. And this same triple goddess motif is Mother Maiden Death, the cycle of life. And this is central to the whole theology of Mother and the Mother of God. And like you can take these characters and theologically put them up against Allah, put them up against the Quran, put them up against God of the Bible, and right there with Jesus too. And so this triple goddess motif is like political, and it's really important that people get to know these three goddesses because it really gives you a whole different take on the Old Testament. When you start to see where Asherah, Astarte, and Anat fit in the story, it really gives you a different take because the first temple Israelites were totally pagan all the way through. They were
Mhm.
pagan to the day they went into exile. They were still fighting about, prophet Jeremiah is criticizing them as they go down the road into exile,
Mhm.
saying, if only you would stop worshiping the Queen of Heaven, and they're like, no, 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 Jeremiah. The Queen of Heaven was protecting us. It's when we stopped. It's when you guys made us stop worshiping the Queen of Heaven that calamity befell us. And they're arguing about it right as they go down after the first temple's been destroyed. So they were pagan all the way through the first temple. The God of the Bible is two separate gods still. El and Yahweh is two separate gods. They've got the mother goddess, and then they have this big reformation and this big divorce, and they kick her out. And I'll like go through the whole story with folks. The whole Bible story. Like, it's in my book. It's like, once you see where the story is, like, you can really trace it really easily, man. It's like, and it actually happened. Like, historically, that first temple really existed, like from 970 BC till 586 BC. We've got archaeological proof, loads of it. Like, we have the records of the Babylonians coming in, like, laying it to waste. Like, we know it happened. So, and we know it was pagan. So, like, they were not monotheists. They weren't Jews as we know it. There was, like, they were pre-Jew. They have some stuff. They got the menorah.
Mhm.
They got some other things, but like, they're totally, they've got this mother goddess, and the mother is wisdom. And so there's something important to learn there. That's the one part that survives, is wisdom, because that's one of the many aspects of Shakti is wisdom. And so that's the part that they keep. And so that, it was all right. Well, let's take the wisdom. Like, let's have at it. Right. Like, give it to me. I want to hear the wisdom.
And the wisdom is being referred to in the, if we could talk about the Hebrew Bible, as feminine. They always call
Absolutely.
wisdom a
Proverbs
woman.
8:1. Like, I was with Yahweh at creation.
Yeah.
Sophia is her name. And well, that's just a
Mhm.
Greek name for wisdom.
Yeah.
But that's, King Solomon is the father of the wisdom traditions, and Proverbs is thick with it. And feminine is she, or wisdom is she, and she stands with Yahweh at creation and helping him out. She's a partner to Yahweh, because, like, this is the actual what the religion was. Like, God had a wife, and like, so, and wisdom is one of the aspects of it, and it's the one part they keep, because they get rid of all the sex, but they keep the wisdom.
Wow. There is, when we talk about the wife of God and the triple goddess, I want to go into, I just spelled something. I want to go into, like, go a little bit further back and talk about the original. Let's look at history of the first worshipped God. The proof that we have that the first worship God was the feminine God. If you want to go into that, I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, my basic take on that is, we have limited evidence from the Ice Age, but the evidence we have a lot of it. There's three things. There's cave paintings,
Yes.
ritual burials, like they start burying people so we can dig up graves. Like, for millions of years, they did not do that. Then at a certain point in history, they started doing it. Same time they're doing cave paintings. And the third thing we find, and they find a lot of them, are the little Venus figurines, which are little carved little totems. Nobody knows exactly what they're used for, but they're always feminine, usually quite rotund, with like large breasts and stuff, and big
Yes.
hips, and kind of fat. But like, definitely, like, or pregnant or giving birth sometimes, but like always like ripe. Um, and and they found thousands of them. Like, they're not rare, like by Ice Age standards. Like, of the stuff they find from the Ice Age, that's the one thing that they find a lot of them. Couldn't put numbers on it.
Now, Ice Age.
Hundreds
Give
of
me,
sites,
give
like
me a,
hundreds of
give
them.
me, give me a number. Like, how long ago would you say that
Oh,
was?
40, 50,000 years ago. The Venus of Willendorf is like around 40. Right.
Yeah, I
It's
was
around
looking.
50,000 years ago is when they start finding all this stuff at the
So
same
let's look
time.
at the Venus of Willendorf as you speak right here. I have that, I think, right there. So everybody can
That's the
take a
most
look
famous one. That's not even the oldest one, but it's like, yeah, that's like the most famous one.
Right.
But there's hundreds. I couldn't tell you. I don't want to get over my skis. I don't know exactly what the number is, but
No, but
definitely hundreds.
it's long ago.
There's hundreds of artifacts. There's
Mhm.
hundreds of different Venus figurines, if not thousands, that they found, starting 40 or 50,000 years ago, and then never stopping, and all the way up in various forms, all the way up into ancient Israel. Ancient
Mhm.
Israel had their form of, they were only just the top half of the body. But they were making tons of. That's another one. Yeah, the earliest known. That one's probably like
I don't know which one.
150,000 BC.
Let's see here what it says. It says, yep, 40,000 years ago. You're right.
And so it's around the same time they start doing cave paintings and burials. So like and for all three of those things, we find many hundreds of sites all across Eurasia. And that basically just continues in that same format. Doesn't really change much. And then the ice age, like climatically, ice ages are radically different weather than what we have today. It's many degrees colder. The glaciers cover all of North America and Northern Europe. The Sahara is lush. Most people are still in during the most of the ice age. People are mostly in Africa. That's the other trick, is they only left Africa not relatively long before, like it's like 60,000 years ago, they leave Africa. But for 2 million years, they'd only been in Africa. So they leave Africa, they follow the Nile, they go up through the middle, right up through the Holy Land, up to the Mediterranean coast, and up into Eurasia. Only about 60,000 years ago. And then it's not long after that, relatively speaking, they start doing this art. And then that continued, that basically is like that for like 50,000 years. And then with this totally different type of geography, because like the coastlines are different. The Sahara is lush, so like things are just totally different. They got the giant animals, saber-tooth tigers and like woolly mammoths and all this megafauna. The plants are like gigantic. It's just like totally different. Like the whole like world was totally different during the ice age. And then something happens at the end of the ice age, and the shit just fucking hits the fan. I'm personally totally persuaded that we were struck by meteors. Frankly, we fly through meteor showers multiple times a year. There's no reason to not believe we don't get hit with the big ones. We know we've been hit by big ones.
Well, that's what they say with the dinosaurs.
Right. And so the argument now is that it's 12,800 years ago we were struck by probably multiple, like probably like a meteor shower, maybe over over a couple centuries even, right? There could be multiple strikes. So, but the point is, at the Younger Dryas, there's this mass extinction event. All the megafauna all die out. All all those big animals, they go away. And human populations are totally demoed, like by like 90%. The Clovis people in North America completely disappear. So like stuff happened, and I am persuaded that this is where the flood stories come from, and this memory that there was a time before when people were thriving, and then the gods struck us all down, and everybody was killed, and there was only a handful of survivors that rebuilt civilization. I'm totally persuaded that that is a memory of something that happened, and it wasn't 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, but it was like 12,000, 13,000 years ago. And then if you look at like the temperature records and how like the weather patterns work and climate, for whatever reason, like the temperatures come right back up, and at the end of the Younger Dryas, and they settle into the range we've been in ever since. And that's when the Neolithic begins. That's when you get Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is the oldest. Like that's the oldest like temple, like with art, like in like big megalithic stones and like artwork. That's the oldest one we've got, and it's right at this moment when we're coming out of this disaster and the temperature stabilizing. That's when you get that very complicated and very deliberate thing that they build. I don't know what it's for. Nobody really knows, but they found it. It's there.
Some say it's like a huge cemetery, like a place to go, a monument for. Who knows?
It was all deliberately buried. That's the other thing. At some point in time, some group of people decided to like carefully bury it. So it's pretty bizarre. Anyway, and then from there forward, we start to get villages and people settling down. And there's about 5,000 years of people living in ever increasingly bigger settlements until they're like, and as far as we know, there's no like real warfare. There's no walls around the cities. There's no signs of fighting. There's no signs of like weapons or murder or any of that stuff. And the settlements get bigger and bigger and bigger until like the ones in the Mesopotamia, in the Fertile Crescent there, they had like thousands of people living together, like even 10,000 people living together in some of these cities with like no kingship or anything. And then the Bronze Age happens, and the next big transition is the introduction of bronze, and this is around 4,000 BC, and then going forward. So around 6,000 years ago, I say that there's 3,000 years of the Bronze Age from 4,000 BC to 1,000 BC, and then 3,000 years of the Iron Age from 1,000 BC until now, and we are now shifting into the Space Age, and we're leaving the Iron Age behind, and we're going into the Space Age, and we may not survive the transition because it's all pretty dramatic.
You don't think
But,
humankind will survive at all?
well, we could very easily,
You don't
destroy
think they might
ourselves with
force
nuclear
a few of
war.
us
And
onto some ships and take us to, like on the SpaceX program, and take us to Mars?
look, if we survive, like we're going out into the next thing. Like where are we going now is a whole other conversation about like
Mhm.
where is civilization going right now in this transition we're in, beginning with the Industrial Revolution a couple hundred years ago, and then we got a couple hundred more years of technology shift to go. Like we're not done yet. Like we got all these robots and AI and synthetic biology all still
Right.
coming.
Right.
Um,
I want to talk to you about that, because getting back to the why would we worship, and I want to see what you think about this. My philosophy, or my take on it, I should say, my hypothesis, not my philosophy. My hypothesis is, when it was for survival, we began worshiping that which we saw helped us survive, and then it goes into sex and food. But even women, I want to see what you think about this, and I don't need an echo chamber. You can say, you can disagree, of course, but women, or the woman, as you saw those figurines, they represent sex. I know that it takes man and woman, but the reproduction is where you can visualize the reproduction in the woman, the breast, the
right.
belly. So I want to, even where the baby comes from, the
Yeah, I
vagina.
think it's a celebration of life and the turning. I think that the cycle of life is central to what the whole mother's about, and I think that that's what people are focused on. Like
Throw it
they
again.
were.
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I think that it's a really joyous tradition to like just focus on the beauty of life and represent, but also ruminate on death and meditate on death a lot, because in meditating on death it like kind of enables you to enjoy life, I think.
Mm,
um and and I think that they're just they reflecting that that they are part of nature, and that they are just embracing the cycle of life. I mean, and it's very, I mean, they're always called fertility religions in the scholarship. um I think it's a life and death, actually. I think they're just as much talking about death as they
hmm
are about life. But I think they're celebrating life, and I think they're trying to enjoy life, trying to not suffer, and and enjoy life. And but yeah, I think the mother is at the heart of these. I'm completely convinced that the mother was at the heart of religious traditions from from the start. And the reason why in the tradition they always talk about the mother coming first, but I think that's a reflection that culturally their religion began with worship of the mother, and that the idea of
Right.
worshiping the immaterial father is a far more sophisticated idea. Like that's a much more like the mother is very visceral. The mother, like you can doesn't a primitive mind can relate to the
Mm,
mother.
exactly. The visual is there.
It's
That's
all like it's already there, but it takes a higher level of consciousness, literally, to think about divine consciousness. But at a certain point, they put two and two together: father, mother, mother, father. I don't think that. I do think primitive people understand a lot of. Like anthropologists will say that primitive people don't understand procreation. It's a very common
what's
idea
interesting.
that
Really?
that men didn't understand where babies came from, and so it's just magic that the women are.
Oh, I see. Okay, wait. Not to interrupt you,
They
but
worship the women
they
because they
didn't
think that it's
understand
a
how we know
magical source of
today.
life.
Excuse me. What? Say it. We were talking at the same time.
That part of the reason why they worship the mother is because she's like this magical source of life, and they
I
didn't
see.
understand.
Yeah.
I think they recognize she's a source of life. I think that they understand that male female sex, I think people understood that for a long time, frankly.
But do you think the father also the mother as the first worshiped God because that was where that was where the survival came from. We're thriving from the womb. You know, they even though they didn't know how we know today, they knew this is where the new people come from.
Right, of
So
course.
so talk to us more about that because you agree that the first worship. I want you to like
I
for
totally,
sure,
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
worship God.
First worship is definitely the mother, and then, um, that's why, like for the Greeks, they would say that Gaia. They talk about Gaia. Gaia, she's the original mother goddess, and she has to give birth to her own husband, who is Uranos, and then they have children, which are Kronos and Rhea, and then Zeus and all them come along after that. But Gaia comes first, and she's the virgin mother of the universe. This is like the virgin mother of God, like where that just very expression comes from, is that the mother was there all by herself, um, and she had to give birth to her own mate. She had to give birth to her own husband, and I think that's a reflection of how primitive Ice Age people would have been much more focused on the mother, because I'm of the opinion that religion is like a 50,000 year long conversation that we've been having and
Right.
developing ideas and developing ever more sophisticated ideas, but also arguing about ideas and having competing ideas and rival ideas. And there's like a lot of
Mhm.
different ways to think about God. But I think everyone's been talking about the same God all along. But they've also been
Right.
talking about the same mother all along. That there's one Mother Earth, one divine mother. And so it's the same mother and same father for the last 50,000 years.
The God. Okay, thinking of talking about that when we look at the actual worship, when we look at the worship, could we say the mother was the first, but not long, but right? The father wasn't far behind as far as the worship of the father, and could we also look at that as the actual material father, the person was often not present in a lot of the how do you say um like hunter gatherer times, you know what I'm saying? They were
Not all cultures have like Native Americans will talk about Sky Father that created the universe, and they talk about Mother Earth, but they don't really talk about them as like deities in the same way we do in the Bible, and they don't
Mhm.
have like pantheons of gods the way these other cultures did. So I mean, one of the things that kind of helped me figure out the whole mother thing was that Native Americans routinely would say, like, yeah, Mother Earth, Sky Father, and how, their Sky Father is the same as the Christian God. Of course, the Christians rejected that, said, oh, you do silly natives. But like, that's what the natives always said. Like, that's like a normal, like, that's the kind of stuff you see in literature about, Native Americans encountering missionaries in the 1600s and what have you. And the engagement between, because Native Americans were plenty intelligent, and so like they're talking to white folks all the time, and so they're having these conversations, and so the natives, they never had a problem reconciling their worldview with Christianity in the sense of like, you believe in a God who created the world, we believe in a God who created the world, but they have Mother Earth, and the Christians did not have Mother Earth, and that's an important distinction. They've got Mother Father together. The Hindus have Mother Father together. Christians, Muslims, Jews, they only have the father and no mother.
They did
That's just
once have the mother father
because they kicked her out, because they locked her in a
yeah.
closet, threw a bag over her head, and like, locked her back there, only brought her out to, beat her and rape her every once in a while.
Let's talk about that because there is a great presence of that those particular things happening in the Torah. Let's just stop with that about the the we're talking about the Israelites and the Bible, the so-called the Old Testament. There's such a great presence of it's okay to go get those women and make them captive and sleep with them.
Totally, man. Yeah.
So when did
Kidnap the girls um,
let's talk about the break in the mother when it went from Asherah, the mother, the wife of God, to let's get all these women and we can just like dominate them and put them in slavery. I love what you taught me about slavery. Can you talk about that and then go into everything else about the origins of slavery, which made so much sense? Can you
yeah,
talk
this is
about that?
I learned this actually after I wrote the book, called The Creation of Patriarchy. Feminist scholar wrote it, that talked about how women were the original slaves. So in this transition from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age, what you get in the Bronze Age it's literally a technology revolution, just like we're having a technology revolution now. This was like the first big technology revolution, and it gives you plows and farm tools, and it gives you swords and weapons. Right, these are the main
Mm.
things we get. They also start riding horses at the same time, and so you get
Wow.
men on horseback coming out of the Eurasian steppe, uh, carrying swords and daggers and armor, and they can roll into these Neolithic villages and just rape and plunder and dominate them.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
that's what they start doing. And they impose themselves as basically warlord, crime lords, like extracting tribute, and impose themselves as a new ruling class of kings. And they call themselves shepherd kings.
Mm. The Hicks.
And it starts in fits and starts, but then by the time we get to 3000 BC, it's totally locked in, because once one town starts doing it, then other people start doing it, and then becomes an arms competition until eventually all the towns are rolled over. And this is why you see city walls that start getting built at a
Mm-hmm.
specific moment in history, because it's after these new invention of these new warlords start coming in. So these guys, they don't take male slaves. The men, they haven't figured out slavery yet, the mechanics of slavery and the psychology of slavery, and so they just kill all the men. But you take the women, and you can enslave the
And the
women,
little
because these are
ones. And the little ones, the small ones, the
right. You
children.
kidnap the children,
Mm-hmm.
so the girls are like, I'm going to protect my baby. So you either kidnap the children, or you impregnate the women,
Mm-hmm.
and then and if the woman's not docile, you just kill her too. So you
Mm-hmm.
just cultivate the docile women, and impose your will on them. And that's the origins of slavery. And they didn't keep male slaves for like 1,000, I don't really know what the numbers are, but like 1,000 years, many centuries. There
Wow.
was just women, because the men are too hard to handle. You literally had to invent chains.
Yeah.
And also you had to impose the psychology that no one liked being a slave, but at a certain point in the history of civilization, it became like culturally normative, and
And
people would
Stockholm
accept it.
syndrome. Don't forget
Exactly,
Stockholm syndrome.
But before that, it was like a new invention. The idea that you would like imagine, breaking the first horses and taming the first animals. And so um, this is where so much mistrust from women to men come from. Yeah, yeah. So um, and this is when they start imposing like patriarchal bloodlines and start to say, all right, it's not enough to kidnap the women. It's now I'm going to track my bloodlines to the father, which means you have to control the women's sex lives. And it becomes very important to keep the girls virgins before they're married, keep the
Yes.
girls monogamous when they're married. While the men are totally not monogamous at all, but the women, it's very important to keep the women monogamous.
I
Because
want to
it's
jump in
going for
because
the
I
male.
want to touch on that. I want to elaborate on that. Talking about polygyny, I do a comparison with polygyny and hypergamy. Women, it's my argument, are innately hypergamous because they're looking for the one who's the guy in charge here, like who's the one who's going to keep me alive. And then the men are polygynous. I mean, of course, we have people who aren't, but I'm saying if we're going to go and talk about the building of civilizations and even what you were talking about, how women were taken captive and they had to survive. They weren't looking for the person who couldn't, get them a leg up or keep their children safe. What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like
You're so
the
funny.
matriarchy did not emasculate
Sure.
men. Like matriarchies continue. Like modern Native Americans, when the colonialists were here, were still matriarchal. Like they had family bloodlines through the mothers. And the other part of it is that when you get married, the man goes lives with the woman's family, the women stay with their own families. And so the mothers and sisters and aunties and cousins all stay together, and they raise the children in a group. And this gives a lot more independence to women. Um, and this is how Native Americans were in the modern day. Um, and so, and many indigenous tribes all over the world, South Pacific, any place where you saw the indigenous people where the girls having open sex lives, it's because they're tracking the bloodlines to the mothers, and the sperm donor doesn't matter. So that's why the fathers aren't upset about their daughters having sex, because like you're not spoiling anything, right? Um,
Mm, okay.
so you see lots of examples of it. And when I started to recognize that part of what's happening in the Bible story is the transition from the 12 tribes, which are still matriarchal in the oldest parts of the Bible. They were transitioning from matriarchal tribes to kingship and patriarchy, because this doesn't all happen in one moment for all of civilization, for all of humanity. It happens over a few thousand years, and so it's happening. It's beginning over the course of the Bronze Age, but then when we shift into the Iron Age from 1000 BC going forward, like the curtain just drops for the women. Like that's another big cataclysm. The Bronze Age collapse. It's all like very dramatic, civilizational breakdown, and when you come out of it, it's the Iron Age. Like the curtain drops on what was left of the old matriarchies. And
Wow.
that's the Greek mythology and the Old Testament. And they're both celebrating it. They're both talking about how they got rid of these priestesses and these goddesses, and how we brought the goddesses in line. We brought the women in line. We imposed our form of marriage, our patriarchal forms of marriages.
Right.
We locked down the girls' sex lives.
Get rid of the mother goddess completely. She
The book
can't
of
be.
Hosea, the prophet Hosea and his wife
Mhm.
Gomer is all about this. Like, I think Gomer is a real person. She's probably a priestess, or at least a symbolic of the Canaanite everyone.
Right, the whore.
She's the woman of adultery, but she's like she's not ashamed, because I think it was normative in their culture that these women were still having the babies belong to them, and it doesn't
Right.
belong to her husband and her. She doesn't have to. She's not obligated to be monogamous to her husband if she doesn't want to be.
Wow, that's so deep.
But they're locking that down. That's like the prophet Hosea is like, ladies, party's over. We're shutting this down. These traditions are over. We're bringing all of you into these patriarchal marriages. There's no more women's households next door to men's households. We're getting rid of all the women's households. Because I think in the Bronze Age, you had both side by side. I think that's what the story of Ruth is about. That Ruth is like this. It's this whole thing about, and Ruth, she's in a patriarchal household, and her husband dies, and she's got a sister too. I don't know if they're married to the same guy or if it's, but anyway, they stay with the mother. The mother-in-law says, "Go back to your mother's house. Your husband's dead. Go back to your mother's house." And the sister leaves, never hear from her again. But Ruth is like, "No, I'm going to stay with you, my mother-in-law, in this house of Yahweh." And then Yahweh delivers Ruth a new husband. And it shows that Yahweh's going to take care of you, girls. If you follow these traditions, Yahweh is still going to take care of you. I think that's what the story of Ruth is about.
And then Boaz, and then she goes into a whole patriarchal type of, I don't know if it was egalitarian more in Moab. I don't want to get too much into that, but I like the comparison. I do want to show you this while you're talking about matriarchal and matrilineal civilizations and communities. We still have the Masuo, and we also have definitely some African countries, some unindustrialized countries, if there are even any more unindustrialized countries, right? They're in Africa that are also still practicing.
Oh, yeah, interesting. What's the website?
This is what is the website you said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is the mmstudies.com matriarchies and the Masuo. The Masuo are very, well, if you haven't heard of them, they are one of the last, thriving communities of matriarchs, and it's all matrilineal. The men, they're women. There's polyandry. That is how they live. And then this website too. Let me give you the link. It doesn't just talk about there's all kinds of different, if you see, it says South Asia, China, Japan.
Yeah. There's tons of them, man. Like, there's tons of them. And a lot of today's academics are like, oh, matriarchies don't exist. And they're totally like, but these people are obviously doing this. This is looks super cool. I know there's some in India. Somebody was just telling me about some folks.
You got to check out the Masuo. The way they are, they are
in Africa, or where are they?
No, they're no. This is Asia. Let me click on it and show you some. Now they are an agricultural community, and here it says right here. Oh, it's in China. Okay, so it's in China, deep in the southwest China. Can you guys read that? I'm going to blow it up a little bit. I did a debate on submission. This is back when I was a little bit more, I don't know. I did a debate on submission and how
property is handed down to the female line.
Yeah.
And there's no stigma in not knowing who a father's child is. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly like the
Don't
essence of
forget
the
this
whole thing.
part right here, Ed. Masuo women offer free sex. So that is really jarring for a lot of Western men, because even one of my dear people in the audience
Right.
was like, "Oh, so they were getting ran through." They were the captain. They are the captains, or they're the captains of their own bodies. So
Right.
nobody's running through them. They're actually, if you want to say run through, they're running through the men. So
Right.
yeah, so it's pretty interesting.
But
Living
no,
near.
but they are pretty sexual societies, but they have their own sexual ethics. It's not like those,
Yeah, they
that's
have. Oh, they definitely do. They get married, but the man comes. You said what you said about the men living with the going to the family in ancient times. Even in the Hebrew Bible, it says, "And he will leave his family and go be with her."
oh yeah,
In
there's
the
tons of examples of it.
in,
Absolutely.
yeah, in the Masuo, the man comes to live with the family, and he's there only during the time for reproduction, and then he leaves. And
Yeah, they
really,
call visiting marriages.
oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, you're familiar with this. So this is great. This is a great conversation. And you know what the problem is?
Yeah, I think this is a central fight that they're having over the entire course of the Old Testament is the fight between these types of cultures that you're describing here and the patriarchal societies that we take for granted that we live with today. Like that was a transition and a reformation, and to get rid and to bring the women in line, you had to get rid of these goddesses that were so powerful and so empowering to the women. You don't want them knowing about Astarte, because Astarte is like totally sexually promiscuous and not submissive to her husband, not submissive to her father. She's a warrior, and she's, and does whatever she wants. And so you don't want to have your young daughters exposed to that idea at all if you want them to be a submissive, girl in a patriarchal framework. And so they got to get rid of them. And Medusa is a totally
I love that story of
Greek
Medusa.
mythology is totally wrapped up in all this too. Greek mythology is doing it just as much as the Bible, as the Old Testament is, because they're contemporary with one another. They're totally
Can you
contemporary
go
cultures.
into some of the history, excuse me, of where we have the goddesses like Anat, and then we have the goddesses. I want you to talk about, if you could, Ishtar, and how it was Hellenized. Those goddesses from the ancient world, and from like Sumer, and from Babylon, and the Akkadian, how they were actually Hellenized, and then go into that for
Yeah,
us.
sure. So it's Mother Maiden Death is that triple goddess is the most important one. And uh so Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte, that's the maiden, and they're always the most popular goddess. Because she's like, the beautiful, sexy warrior maiden, and everybody loves her. The death goddess, like, she's a little terrifying. So
Yeah,
like that's not the really the most popular one. And the mother goddess is there, but she's like the queen mother, and a little more like reserved and a little more like set back. But the daughter, she's the one who's at like the in all the stories, right?
years.
And and she's literally the most popular one that you'll see. You would in India today, Durga temples are all over the place, and because she's like vivacious and exciting, and she's inspiring, and she's desire. She's the essence of desire. Like everyone wants to be her, or be with
Passion.
her, or be smiled upon by, have her favor. She's the essence of desire. So Ishtar is one of these. So you can draw a line of Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte. Then when you ask about the Greeks, so this is what happens. The Greeks and the Hebrews are contemporary, but they handle the goddesses a little bit different. The Old Testament, the Jews, they get rid of her altogether. Like there's just father, there's no mother. We're not even gonna like. But the Greeks, they keep the mother around. The Greeks and Romans, but they refashion them. So do the Hindus. They refashion them so that they'll be still submissive to, for the Greeks, submissive to Zeus. So what they got to do is they take Ishtar and they break. So they had Aphrodite Urania, who was their version of the Queen of Heaven. Urania means heaven, and they break her in half basically and create Athena. And so the warrior and wisdom stuff goes with Athena, while Aphrodite is left, and now you have Aphrodite Pandemos, which is there's two different Aphrodites in Greek religion. There's the older one, that's the more powerful one, who's dressed in armor, and then but the Aphrodite that we usually get taught about, who's just sex and love and beauty and a total like wimp. Like she doesn't fight because in Homer and the Iliad, she steps out on the battlefield and she gets nicked on her finger and she cries and runs away. It's like it's very important. They take away her powers of war. They split her into multiple goddesses, and then they gave the Queen of Heaven the crown to Hera, who's Zeus's wife, and Hera is totally submissive to Zeus. And in all the stories between Zeus and Hera, Zeus is running around and having all these lovers, and Hera never punishes Zeus. She always punishes the other women. She always punishes and torments all the women that Zeus had sex with, even though
Ed, same thing happens with Athena with the Medusa. It's Athena, right?
It's Athena that chases after Medusa, exactly.
Wow.
And Athena is very central to this because she sits at the right hand of Zeus and she's Zeus's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But Athena is like kind of a new creation for these Hellenistic Greeks. I mean, the name was around, but she is she's created fully born out of Zeus's
his head. Yeah.
So she's not born of a mother. That's key. She's
right.
not born of a mother.
Oh my gosh,
comes directly out of Zeus. And
she's the goddess of war.
She's a goddess of war and wisdom and all the arts of civilization. She is the one responsible for all of civilization. She's a goddess of weaving.
Hold on, stop. So there's the switcheroo right there, the bait and switch.
That's the switcheroo.
It's like she didn't come from the woman. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Reminds me of the rib, the woman creation came out of Adam.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole other example of that, like saying the woman came from the brother. That Adam and Eve is a totally contemporary story to all this. Like the same cultural dynamic going on just across the water. But
keep going. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. So then Athena comes out of him. So we're still there's no more mother goddess. We're dealing with all
and then in the Oresteia, which is a very famous trilogy about Orestes, which is a story of matricide. Athena rules at the end. It's the origins of Greek courts and a whole bunch of stuff. Athena makes the final judgment. Orestes had killed his mother. It's a whole long story, and he's put on trial. And Athena is the judge. And at the final end of this whole long drama, the trilogy, Athena rules in Orestes' favor and says, "I was not born of a mother. It is only the seed that counts and not the womb."
Oh wow!
And I will always favor the father.
Oh my God!
And Orestes is acquitted, and he becomes the king. And it's this whole ritual of the matricide of these old tribal cultures. So that's how they're dealing with the Greeks are doing it is they're celebrating how they shut down the old tribal cultures, how they brought the women in line, how they subjected the women to these kinds of marriages where the men are promiscuous and the women are not. And the women are taught to punish the girls.
Women, yes.
Punish other women. It puts women at rivalry with one another. And this kind of marriage is extended all the way into the modern age. To the perfect example of this in the modern day is Bill and Hillary Clinton, where Bill Clinton was always running around. He's the president of the United States. He's the alpha male. And he's always running around getting all the tail he can get his hands on. He's a totally promiscuous bastard, hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and all this stuff. And what happened? What does Hillary Clinton do when he gets punished? She goes and punishes the women. She punished Jennifer Flowers. She punished Monica Lewinsky. Hillary Clinton was always the one leading the charge to
that's classic.
These girls.
That's classic.
Even though Bill Clinton is basically a rapist.
But Medusa is literally
Medusa is another one. Medusa gets tangled up with Poseidon because Poseidon and Athena are big rivals. Poseidon being Zeus's brother. Poseidon, he wants to be king of the gods. So they're both competing for Zeus's favor or whatever. They don't like each other. And in all the mythology, Poseidon and Athena are always rivals.
Why'd she even punish her?
Poseidon, Medusa is a priestess of Athena.
Yes.
And Poseidon rapes her or something, tricks her, rapes her. And Athena punishes Medusa by turning her into the whole snake thing. The snakes is part of the goddesses too. So turning the snakes from a symbol of power that was the goddess's symbol into something that's bad is what they're doing in the Bible. And the Greeks are doing it too. Or they're doing that with Medusa. But anyway, so Medusa was a priestess of Athena who Athena punishes simply because she got raped by Poseidon. Like she didn't even want to sleep with Poseidon. Poseidon like tricked her or raped her or something.
Yeah, he did. Let's try to chill out. I gotta edit some of the R words out. Just say grape, but we're good. We're
Right.
good.
Yeah.
We're
Never
good.
mind.
But you know what? That's absolutely true. So you talked about the serpent. That's one of my favorite topics. I attribute the darkness in the beginning, the chaos that could be represented as serpent energy. As above, so below. It could be the serpent and the dove that's referenced in Christianity. I want to, and then there's they call the god. There's a serpent in Kemet called a pep, also a popsis in Greek. That isn't said to be feminine energy or represented as feminine, but it makes sense that there's that duality. We've got the serpent, which is chaotic darkness, and then we have the god Osiris, or the god Ra, I should say, or is it Amun? I always get those mixed up. I think it's Amun in the beginning in the creation story. What I'm getting at is I want you to go into Kemet a little bit. I don't know how much you've studied on that, but we do have the serpent represented as the goddess of the, y'all know, I forgot what it's called. It's coming out of the Waj. It's the Upper Egypt and the Lower Egypt, and their goddesses. I'm going to find it, but it's the serpent. So tell us more. After all of that, I just want you to tell us more about what you know about the goddess and the serpent correlated.
Yes, they're very closely associated. There's gajillion examples of goddesses with serpents in their hands, and
right.
Loads of archaeology and loads of symbolism in multiple cultures, and it's still there today in Hinduism. You can't really see it but there's Shiva has always got a serpent with him. So the serpents are still around because serpents represent circularity again, and the serpent eating its tail, but also the serpent, the way it sheds its skin, sort of represents eternal life, and it's always part of these circularity cycle of life traditions. It's there in Egypt, it's there in Canaan, in the Bible, in the actual historical Old Testament time period, all over Greece. It's all over the place. And so one of my arguments is that in the Garden of Eden story, when they make the serpent bad, that this is part of this reformation where they're overthrowing these goddess symbols, because the serpents had always, Moses carried a serpent staff. Like the serpent was a symbol of wisdom and power. And, in the Garden of Eden, they say the serpent was the most clever animal. Right. So because the serpent is wise, and one of the things he represents, and it still represents in modern Hinduism, is that at creation, so like the Bible got Leviathan and Kemet, at the chaotic waters of creation, there's a great serpent monster. It's there in Hinduism. They've got a name for it. There's a name for it in every tradition. Super common. And I don't really know. It's so old that we don't know where it originally came from, but it's like in all the cultures have got this serpent monster, the Leviathan or whatever it is, at in the waters, in the chaotic waters of creation. Those waters of creation, by the way, are the mother, are Shakti. That's the material, unformed matter and chaos.
Shakti, are you talking about Hinduism?
Yeah.
So that for me, I didn't even know that, but that's what I'm saying. Even in the creation story of the Bible, when it says the darkness, those are the waters. And then the creation stories in Kemet, one of them, I forgive me, y'all, I think it's the Heliopolis creation story. They say there's this water, a pep is in the water that Amun comes out of. So yes, that's awesome. Look at this. I want you to see that. It is actually the two ladies, the sculptor model of the hieroglyph of the royal title. This is basically 332. Between 332 and 30 BC.
The two ladies, a serpent and a dove. Is that
yes. No, that's a vulture. And these are what I was talking about. This is the goddess of. They're represented. The goddess of Upper and Lower Egypt are represented by a cobra and a vulture, which I'm going to get out of here. Let me see if I could go to another one. That's okay. See this? See the crown?
Yep. Yeah. No, it's super common in Egypt. The serpents they're all over the place. I mean, there's a million examples of it.
I was just saying that's actually a female goddess that's represented from the beginning. So it's great to just to match those together, because we do have the all even the Bible, they have the seraphim, which are and the nakash, they are divine beings that are serpents, but again, there they are represented as feminine first, before they became like a body of all different, male, female, so to speak. And what's funny is that Hebrew Israelites, they'll tell you, or even some Christians, some very radical Christians will say, oh, there are no female angels in the Bible. Not at all. But the Bible shows divine serpents are, I'm doing a long stretch, but you see the connection. So I say that the feminine representation of divine serpent was there first. That's all. That's all.
And like it's definitely, and they would breed serpents too, like in the temple, like in the temples were often granaries. Like that's how the first temples got built, were like they were actually storing the grains that they were cultivating. Like, it's all very practical stuff in the beginning. It was like, their warehouses, and so they would cultivate serpents to protect the grain, to eat the rodents and stuff. And they started using, and they were using, so you have like you'll find lots of like what they call snake tunnels at at various temple sites. It was like quite a common thing, where they're like little like tubes, like all like a little like snake nests that are like cultivated into the temple structures, and they would keep snakes and do rituals, and I don't know, whatever they were doing with them, getting snake bit so they can have psychedelic visions. And
well, they do that in India right now. They do
modern day Christianity. There's like some Christians that snake.
Oh yeah, the guys that hold
West
the
Virginia, like
rattlesnakes.
It's like never gone away. Like you can still find examples of it today.
Right, and I just wanted to read this. So here for everyone, it says an image of ritual Manat necklace depicting a ritual being performed before a statue of Sekhmet on her throne, where she is flanked by the goddess Wajet, that's as the cobra, and the goddess Nekhbet as the griffin vulture. And so these are ancient artifacts. So the serpent was definitely not only represented in ancient Kemet worship, but represented as feminine. Yay! I wish I could use it. Do I have any clapping applaud? Anyway, so this is interesting. Okay, you know what? There's so much. Ed, you got to be a regular over here. I got to start bringing you on. I wanted to see if people wanted to come in and like just ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
But is there anything that you wanted to cover, like that you're talking about recently? Because you went into that beer. We got to talk about the beer, because I have a whole documentary on that.
I mean, if there's one thing I'd like to talk about is how like this stuff is relevant today. Like why this triple goddess is relevant today.
Okay.
Because it's in the Quran too. In the satanic verses in the Quran, Alat, Manat, and Uzzah, and the story of the satanic verses, if you're not familiar with it.
Oh yes, I am.
You are.
They almost killed it. They pulled it, took his eye out. I can't remember. Oh my God.
Well, like that's what happened with Salman Rushdie. Like they did a fatwa against Salman Rushdie because he used the name in the title of the book, but he's not like he was digging into the theology of the satanic.
No.
But they were so sensitive about it, they issued a fatwa on him because they don't want anyone talking about the satanic verses, because satanic verses is actually kind of interesting, because the story is, if you know the story of what the verses are in the Quran, is that
is this guy affiliated with esoteric thoughts? Yes, he was. This is where I met Ed over on our friend Esoteric Thoughts. Rest in peace to Esoteric. So yeah. Anyway, they remember you from there, maybe.
Right, and so the story is that Muhammad, when he was alive, and he was early in his career, when he was still formulating Islam and hadn't got it all dialed in yet. They were pagans, like they were Arabian pagans. He was born into a pagan culture. And so these three goddesses, Alat, Manat, and Uzzah, with Manat being like Anat and Kali, and Alat being the mother goddess, and Uzzah being like Ishtar. These were the most popular goddesses in pagan Arabia. Like they don't have that much evidence of like from the archaeology about like what these people were doing. But the one thing they have a lot of evidence of is these three goddesses. They are super common in the pre-Islamic Arabia. And you find lots of examples of them, but there's no stories. These are illiterate cultures. We only have pictures of them. But so we don't know that much about them, but we can piece it together now. And so the story is that Muhammad originally said it was all right to worship these three goddesses, and then for 8 years said it was all right, and then
Those are his
decided
daughters.
they call them the cranes, the exalted cranes, I think, but they're the daughters of Allah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different. They might call them that, um, and and then 8 years later, he said, no, that he reversed course and said, no, you can't worship. It's got to be pure monotheism. We're not going to have these three goddesses. And so they call that the satanic verses because they say that Muhammad got tricked by Satan to say that it was okay. So the question is, well, if Muhammad was he tricked when he said that you should worship these goddesses, or was he tricked when he said you shouldn't worship these goddesses? Which is the deception? I don't know. You would tell me. That we should or should not worship these goddesses. Like, that's an important question. And that's actually an important question of theology of Islam, because hell, they claim God has no partner. But if you say, well, these three goddesses are there, they're in your holy book, and Manat, who's like Kali, she's powerful. Like, she's the most powerful piece on the chessboard. She can't be stopped. She can destroy all of God's creation. The stories of Anat from the Canaanites that the archaeologists have dug up have her going up to El, the father of the universe, and demanding stuff from him and saying, I'm going to throw you down like a lamb, smash your skull, and make your gray beard red run with gore. And he gives her what she wants every time.
Now you're talking about Anat.
Anat, yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that. And I want you to go into. You made me remember about the God. I want you to talk about resurrection real quickly. Latikia Bush, peace. I love you. Peace to everybody. Hold that thought. And I do want to mention again about Esoteric. It was heartbreaking to lose him. He is a very wonderful person. Peace to his family. Peace to. Please go subscribe to that channel and show them a lot of love. But so Anat. Can we segue? I'm going to bring in somebody who might want to ask you a couple questions. Sure. Can we segue into the ball cycle and the dying and rising God?
Yeah, ball cycle is one of my favorite ones. Like, that's like one of the most important.
Go for it. I'm ready. I'm ready to hear you go in on that. And she'll just sit here and listen, and then you can jump in and ask your question. But I just want to hear him go in this piece, Genesis. So talk to us about the ball cycle. I want to hear that.
All right. So the ball cycle is recent archaeology that was dug up in recent decades and only released out to the public literally since we've been alive, since the 80s or something. And it's the only mythology we've found. It's from the city of Ugarit, which was on the coast of what is today Syria, just on the north side of Lebanon. And it was destroyed in the Bronze Age collapse and around 1200 BC. And all these texts got buried, and they survived on clay tablets. And archaeologists were able to dig them up. And then, as I was saying, in recent years, it's been translated and made available to the public. And it's the only mythology we have that's like Canaanite mythology. So that all the gods that we see in the Bible, El, not Yahweh, but El and Baal and Asherah and Astarte and Anat, and as well as some other gods, are all, we don't have any examples of Canaanite mythology. It's like the only one we've got. And the Baal story is really dramatic. There's a few stories that they found, but the Baal cycle is the most important one because it's a story of how Baal dies and is resurrected and becomes king of the gods and then dies and is resurrected. So there's many of these dying and rising god stories, these resurrection stories that are at the heart of the goddess theology. And this is one more example of it. And in this story, so Baal is like the big bad guy in the Old Testament. He's like Yahweh's big rival. This is when the Hebrew prophets talk about the Israelites and the Canaanites doing bad stuff, worshiping Baal is number one on the list. Like, they're trying to destroy the Baal temples and kill the Baal prophets. Like, this is like a big thing that they had a real historical rivalry with. And so now we've got a story about Baal. And in this story, so there's three brothers, Baal, Yam, and Mot, who are just like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So Baal is like Zeus. Yam is the god of the sea, just like Poseidon. And Mot is just like Hades for the Greek. So the Greek mythology is tracking the same framework. And in fact, I think that these Canaanite gods are the Titans that the Hellenistic Greeks are fighting against. I think the Canaanites are the Titans because they say that El is Kronos. That's like one thing the Greeks say a lot because they interacted with the Phoenicians and stuff a lot. So these gods never went away. Baal worship didn't stop. So like we have stories about them, or like we have like the Greeks talking about them. So anyway, when Baal, he fights with Yam to be king of the gods, and Baal, his consort is Anat, and Anat is like Kali, and she is this goddess of death. She's wearing a necklace of freshly severed heads. She's got the belt of human hands. She's bathing in blood. She delights in slaughter. She kills everybody. She's like Sekhmet. She, and delightfully. So she is just this goddess of death and destruction, and she is like Baal's consort. So like that makes Baal a pretty powerful god. Imagine Zeus married to Kali, right? Like it's like that's an unstoppable power couple that nobody could compete with those two. If you imagine it that way, because that's pretty much what it is. Zeus married to Kali, but they're brother and sister. At any rate, they want to build after.
And Baal and Nod are brother and sister too, right?
What's that?
He's brother and sister with the Nod as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they're all like it's all.
Yeah, they're all okay. Okay, go ahead.
they're the gods, right?
Okay.
So it's a long story. So there's a bunch of different little vignettes in there. Anat helps Baal defeat Yam, the Poseidon character. He becomes king of the gods, and then they want to have a temple built to Baal. And so Asherah and El are the mother goddess and the heavenly father. So El, the god of the Bible, El Elyon, Elohim, that's El, the Canaanite El, and he's the high god. And Asherah is the mother goddess. And so they've got to go visit El and Asherah and get permission to build a temple. And every time they go up, when they go visit Asherah, she's totally terrified. She's like, oh my God, Anat's going to kill me. She's going to kill all my lions. Like, whatever you want, I'm going to give it to you. And she's like, I want a temple for Baal. And she's like, all right, well, go visit El, your father, and you'll get his permission. And they go visit El, and Anat, she's not respectful or nice or pleasant. She walks right up to El, the high god, the creator of the universe, and says, give me what I want, or else I'm going to smash your skull in,
right,
throw you down like a lamb, and, make your gray beard run red with gore. And this happens in multiple stories. This isn't just one story. There's multiple instances where she goes up to her father and talks to him in this manner. Says, do not be so proud of your house, El. I will tear it down with my mighty arms. Like, she's like threatening him in every encounter. And El's response is not to get mad, not to get indignant. His response is like, oh, my daughter. Nobody is terrible as you are. What can I do for you today? And she says, well, I want a temple for Baal. And she says, all right, you can have a temple for Baal. And she says, you are very wise, El. She doesn't say thank you. She says, you are very wise for giving me what I want. And off they go and they get their temple. And then the story goes on and Baal gets a little too big for his britches or something. And he wants to take over for Mot, the god of death.
Yeah.
But the gods are like, no. God of death is still the god of death. You got your place. He's got his place. And so Mot kills Baal.
Right.
In a battle. And Baal dies. And fertility all around the world dies. The plants aren't growing. And all the gods go into mourning. So El goes into mourning. He's wearing sackcloth.
Right.
And he's, moping about, sad. He's like, what's going to happen to all the people now that Baal is dead? And Anat, she goes into mourning. She wears sackcloth and cuts herself and all this stuff. And then she has had enough after a while, and she decides she wants Baal back. So she goes and finds Mot, who's Hades again, and she goes and confronts him and grabs him by the collar and says, give me back my brother.
Right.
And then she pulls out a sword and cuts him in half and grinds him up with a sieve and burns him with fire and feeds him to the birds. And you can't imagine that in Greek mythology. No one's going up to Hades and cutting him in half with a sword and feeding him to the birds.
Right.
That's what Anat does in this Canaanite mythology. And that brings back Baal. And Baal is restored to life. And he sits upon his throne and everyone's happy because fertility is restored to the land. And like that's how Anat, she's like Isis for the Greeks.
Wow.
She's restoring Osiris Well, Anat is playing the same role. She's restoring the king of the gods to his throne. So imagine that from the Greek perspective. Imagine that Zeus has this Kali wife who restores him to the throne. Like, no way. The Greeks aren't going for that. They're like getting rid of that stuff. But that's what was there. That was these goddess. That's what these goddesses were like, of these old matriarchies. They're these unstoppable forces, and
Wow.
more powerful than the gods. And they're not submissive to the gods. They destroy the gods. Like Anat's totally the most powerful one. She wipes out Baal. She wipes out Yam. She wipes out Mot. She wipes out everybody. Nobody can touch her. Nobody can touch Sekhmet either in Egypt. Ra says that about her. Says she doesn't even know her own power. That nobody can stop her.
Wow. When you're telling the story about the, I don't know why so many Christians are so offended when you compare Baal, or I say Baal, to to the story of Jesus Christ in the New Testament, and then you also have it's very subtle.
Jesus
but you
is
have
another resurrected God too.
Yes, and you see the women are involved in that whole resurrection, where you can see that mirrored in from that.
It's the three Marys.
Yeah,
it's repeating itself.
Yeah,
in Christianity, the three Marys are not just witnesses to the resurrection; they're responsible for the resurrection. They pull Jesus. They give him a sedative. The wine vinegar is a sedative. They fake his death. They pull him down.
Are you talking from Islam? Wait, where are you getting that from?
This is my version of the story. That
okay.
That I totally argue for swoon theory, like the Muslims say. Jesus didn't die on the cross, but I take it farther to say that the three Marys are not just witnesses to the resurrection; they're responsible for it. That Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, and Mary Salome, that they're not just witnesses to what happened; they're responsible for it. The three Marys raised Jesus the man, took Jesus the man, and turned him into Jesus the God. And
you know what I learned
at the heart of Christianity is the mother.
I learned from our brother, the Kemetic priest Jabari. Peace to you, Jose. I see you. I'm going to get to Genesis. He said that name Mary comes from Egypt, from Kemet, and I forget what he said it means.
Well, it comes from Miriam, that was Moses' sister.
Meret was a goddess associated with rejoicing and singing and dancing. So it's interesting that name Mary, Miriam. It's amazing. Oh, and Miriam, Miriam is a Kemetic name. Did you know that?
Okay.
Yeah, check it out.
No, I didn't know that, but I believe it.
Check your sources, just like you said. Okay, peace to Genesis. Thank you for waiting so patiently, and then I'm going to get to your question, Jose. Peace. Hello.
Yes. So, hey, this has been a great broadcast. It's been awesome. I want to know. Okay, so you have deities like Mami Wata, right? And there were these things called Sibyls, right?
Sibyls
that
are
at some point were a part of the Catholic Church. They were prophets known as Pythonists. They worked the oracles in the Black Egyptian colonies in ancient race, Rome, Turkey, Israel, Syria, Babylon. Their holy temples were more numerous than the churches of today. I want to see if there's any connection to those. Also, are you aware of the Orisha when it comes down to Olokun? Olokun being like a kind of like a mix of a man and a woman priest.
The trans
Oshun, and Oya, and all of like the Yoruba. Are you familiar with the Yoruba?
I'm not really familiar with all the stuff you're mentioning there, but I can talk about trans folks. They're definitely in the story. They're in the Bible, and they were men castrating themselves in service of the mother goddess is a common feature that you see all over the place, including in the Old Testament. It gets translated as temple sodomites. These are the eunuch trans folks. Some of them are transvestites, some of them are transsexuals, but they're totally there. In all these different cultures, you can find examples of them, and they continue into modern day India. So have always, whether you like them or not, trans folks have always been part of the story of the human fabric.
Right. So there's actually a part in the Bible that says to make yourself a eunuch.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
not
Jesus talks
supposed
about it,
to.
absolutely.
3 different ways to be a eunuch.
No, that's not correct. That I already corrected that guy. It's not saying make yourself a eunuch, cutting your penis off. It says in the Old Testament, don't make yourself a eunuch because
Yeah,
that's what they were
don't.
doing.
But Jesus says Jesus does talk with the eunuchs. He says there's some eunuchs are made, and
Yes,
some eunuchs are. I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but he does mention 3 different ways.
but he doesn't say make yourself a eunuch.
No, he doesn't instruct you to do it, but he says there are types, and he says some are eunuchs in service of God because there's religious types, there's the harem types, and some that are just service of the palace that are like secular eunuchs, I guess, that like work in the palaces because they're trusted. Because the reason why they like them in the palaces is because they're not impregnated the women, and also they don't have offspring, so they don't have
for the
competing
queen
rivalries with the king, because they don't have families of their own. That's why you got to have palace eunuchs and temple eunuchs, and
Yes, I can get
But
that.
are you familiar with the actual symbols, like when it comes down to the Roman Catholic Church that they were worshipped before? A lot of
I'm not specifically familiar with them.
Sibyls are like the Vestal virgins. They're the equivalent to that. The Sibyls, the oracles.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, no, there's women priestesses were super common until they weren't. Basically until they shut it down. I mean, as far as like in Christianity, there was tons of women. Jesus was hanging out with women. They're central to his ministry, and they're also central to Paul's ministry and like hosting the house churches. Mary Magdalene was a financial supporter of Jesus. So like women were central in early Christianity until like, in the 100 sometime, the 2nd century, they shut it down and, kick the women out and not let them be priests anymore. But originally with Paul and Jesus, they most certainly were.
But here's the question. So you have nuns, right?
Yeah.
So what is the difference between like a nun in its capacity and the priests that were in the church?
There's the nuns as a tradition where it's not something I can't really get any detail on it. But they were established at a certain point in the history of the Catholic Church that they established nuns and nunneries as a with that name. And they're pretty early on, but I can't really speak to it.
I can tell you this, that when we talk about the Vestal virgins and even any type of prophetic oracle that was female, and you did discuss this, Ed, where the priests, the males who were at once the how do you say the guardian of them, changed over and started to usurp authority over them, and they started to be the heads of them. So when we talk about Vestal virgins, we're talking about in Rome, that goes down. You can move down the line into the priesthood, which is the head of the church, the male priest, the Pope, the cardinals, they're all male. And then they changed the nuns over to the servants. They're the lower. So it's like looking at the progression from Sibyls or Vestal virgins. And if you could just go into that too.
Yeah, they don't have any like
the transition of from the male serving the oracle to then the oracle is now under the male.
Yeah, there was definitely a break. Like they shut down all the pagan temples in the 4th and 5th century in the Roman Empire, and like they were very hostile, and they came in and really shut them down with force. And then there's a clean break for a while, a couple centuries, and then they restart the nuns like with like a clean, fresh slate of paper to like what are the new rules for the Catholic nuns, and they're not doing the same stuff that they were doing, in the Greek and Roman context. And they're definitely not doing any sacred sex, because there was sacred sex in different contexts, but not in the Catholic context, obviously.
Well, not in the open.
Not in the open, right? What's going on behind closed doors, who knows? But
oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, women are obviously always around, so like you got to find something for the women to do.
Wow.
I mean, according to them, though, I when I would go, there's a rectory where the priests live, and then there's a convent. They're right across from each other, or side by side. And so when I grew up as a Catholic, going to Catholic church, Catholic school, the nuns they were in close proximity, like you said, and
Right.
and they lived like almost. It was such a. Let me be nice. I love the nuns, but they lived such they took such a strong vow of poverty, which that guy was a guy was on your channel talking about that.
Yeah,
Genesis.
Mel Smith from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
Yeah.
The priests are supposedly doing this vow of poverty, but they live in great. They eat well. They maybe you could go into that too.
I'm not an expert on the Catholic
No,
Church.
not about the actual Catholics, but the politics of how once the males took over, they never wanted to. Why did they? I know you kind of touched on it, but what was it was a power struggle with the women. The women
Yeah,
were
I mean,
too
I can only
powerful.
speculate on the reasons, but I think you nailed it. I think it's just a power struggle. And I don't know. I think, why, in those centuries were they, making this decision. I mean, aside from controlling family lines and everything that sort of flowed from that. But yeah, I think they're taking away the women's wealth, power, independence. And I think trying to just take advantage of the women, frankly. And I think it's centuries long and it plays out over different cultures. So but there's no question like the whole world shifts to being patriarchal, like pretty hard, but from 1000 BC going forward, I mean, like the whole world for the last 3000 years, the whole world has been super patriarchal.
Super
China,
patriarchal.
everywhere.
Here's a question though. Do you feel that like maybe trans or eunuch a priest were given favor in those situations, like versus the women, where the male priests that were eunuch or transgender were more favored and like given better privileges in those situations?
No, they weren't. I can answer that. They weren't, because temple male prostitutes were just equal to female male prostitutes in ancient times. Once they did that, I mean, you can. Jose, you can come in after that. You can elaborate on that. But once they relinquished that whole male power, they became sacred prostitutes serving essentially males, just like the women served the males. But
yeah, I think the men
But
are
even in like
reducing their masculinity.
Yeah.
in like Saudi right now, or like Turkey right now, they have the male like kind of like thing going on with the men. And I think it's a Turkey, or like, you know what I'm talking about, like the men. Is it Turkey or is
That's
it
not Turkey. It's in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan?
In modern day, yeah. I mean,
they're called bacheha. They're little boys. They're not
Right.
men. They're
So
little boys.
is that like a similar practice that was going on at that
I mean,
time?
I can only speculate. I mean, I think that they keep the women so locked down, and like they just don't have women to have sex with, so they just start having sex with the boys.
Yes, they party with the boys. It's not the same as the bacheha. The bacheha are literally sex slaves. In ancient times, and Ed can jump in and correct me or agree. In ancient times, it was literal worship. They were worshiping, they were serving the goddess.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the goddess cultures, like they're doing it in service of the goddess. Like in the Roman era, like they've got a lot of literature about Cybele, who's one of the big mother goddesses in Rome, Magna Mater, and they've got the Galli priests of Rome. And we've got a bunch of literature about men castrating themselves in the service of Cybele,
right?
And that is like very, very well documented.
Were they men or boys, like little boys, or like grown men?
Definitely grown men. I mean, the main literature is grown men, but I think they did it to boys too.
And then we talk about, when we go into that, we're going into
the Christian ethics that they do when Christianity comes along, is they stop castrating little boys. It's like they put a halt to that thing, They were doing the whole partial castration for the singers, but that's a whole different conversation. That goes into the pederasty of Greek times, and that's not some. I mean, you could look at it as a type of where the women are oppressed, then the children are also oppressed and preyed upon, right? I mean, it takes us away. There's definitely different cultures that prey upon children. Some cultures, I mean, like we see it in today's Afghanistan, where it's open season on 13-year-old boys.
Yeah, that's sad. Still going on. Hey, the Catholic Church. I can't.
So yeah, I mean,
And
the
it's
Catholic
not
Church.
just a Catholic church. Every single
Well,
church.
that's Islam that's doing that. But I
Every,
was just trying to
every
understand
church.
because R.I.S.E, right? When you get into Roman Catholic culture, you get it like the whole not Roman Catholic, but Roman mythology. You have the god R.I.S.E. Cupid.
Well,
Right?
every religion has a sexual base to it, not just that. I do want to get to Jose. Oh, well, he's stepping away. Jose, hi. I know he's been waiting, but I don't know. Sex is in every single religion. Every single religion.
Yeah, they all
I'm
deal
not
with it one way or another.
defending Rome, though. I'm definitely not defending Rome because they were off the chain with the whole Greek and Roman, like especially the Greek pederasty was so prevalent.
Right.
Like,
That's what I was trying to get into, like the fact that like even and how much of that has been merged into the actual Christendom of church.
well,
Right?
there's tons of pederasty and homosexuality in African culture and African spirituality as well. It's everywhere. So I know I've heard that conversation about, oh, when did we become homosexual? Was it from the Greeks? And I could go
No,
into,
that's not where I was trying to go into. I was not trying to
yeah.
go there.
So hold that
I
thought
was
one
more
Genesis. I'm gonna just hold that thought. I just want to get him in because he's been waiting for a minute. Jose, hello. Thank you for joining. What would you like to add?
Does Edward, do you study any of the language of
Excuse
the
me?
culture? Do you study any of the languages of the culture? Can you
No,
read
I'm
the
not very good
language?
with languages, to be honest with you.
You should.
With the Hebrew stuff, I totally use the computers.
No, I think that you should learn languages because you would find it interesting. Because I'm studying.
Yeah, no, I just don't have a very good facility with it. But yeah, I appreciate the languages. Obviously, the Greek and all the I rely on the academics for that translation. Sorry, my dog is bothering me. Charlie.
Yeah, we're going to be closing it down soon. I appreciate you being here. I'm going to let you let Jose. You're kind of breaking up, Jose, but I don't know if you wanted to say more. You're breaking up, though.
I was gonna say since I started studying Medu Necha, I realized it's much different than what I thought. When you read it in the original language and you understand some of the original language.
Yeah, absolutely.
It starts to ruin the fantasy of what people tell you about these things. Because a lot of people
Wow,
read
that's
it
too
and
bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
no, it's a fact. It's not as nice as you thought it was. So you should,
Okay.
I would advise people, even if you don't understand the language, find some resource that has the original language with a translation, so you can start to understand much better. Because if you read it in
Right.
English, you don't
That
understand.
sounds great. Yeah. So we do have a lot of comedic teachers and anybody do you know about Digital Hammurabi? Anybody on here? Ed, you've heard of
Yeah.
that channel? Yeah, so you can look up the Sumerian. You can look at the different languages that are taught by different sources, different teachers. So, yeah, thank you. Did you have any questions about the presentation or not the presentation, the interview? Any questions about that, Jose, or before I move on?
Well, I've heard Edward speak before, and I pretty much understand what he's saying.
Well, thanks.
Men have taken over, and they just make the woman, in Christianity, they made the woman a ghost.
Not just Christianity.
Yeah, Christianity in particular, because a lot of in Christianity.
Islam, all the Abrahamic faiths.
Okay, fair enough. Yes.
Yeah.
And the Abrahamic faith specifically, like, eliminate the mother and is divorced from the mother. But the whole world went patriarchal. But now we're shifting into the space age, and the balance of power is shifting again. And women are like getting the opportunity to take power back if they take it. But
Do you really think that we're getting that power back, though?
I think the women need to stick together. I think that's the key
Yes,
lesson of the matriarchy. It's like labor unions. Labor unions, it's all about the workers staying together. And that's in the transition to patriarchal marriages. It's all about breaking the women apart from one another and into individualized with one man at a time.
Yes.
As opposed to the women having the bond of their sisterhood being more important than their marriages.
Woo! Come on.
Because that's the essence of matriarchy, is that the sisterly bonds or the matriarchal bonds are more important than the bonds with their husbands.
So do you think that, like, with the advent of AI, is it a male matriarchal system or a
I think
feminine?
AI is so fresh; it's what we make of it. But like women, just in general, getting economic power and gaining independence from men is the first step. But now they got to figure out. Women got to figure out that they need to like start building families around their sisterhoods.
Yes.
Have you heard about the Medusas? Do you know about the Medusas that used to like actually like castrate the men after or cut their heads off after like they would like get pregnant by them and cut their heads off?
I don't know. Maybe it's some places
What
doing
culture is that?
Not very
I
friendly.
know there was a cult of Medusa, like a Greek cult, maybe. But are you talking about recent?
No, that was the Greek cult of Medusa, because they would go, and if you were a man, they would like get in with you and like rape you as a man, drug
Yeah,
you.
I don't want to use that word too much. Y'all have been
I'm sorry, rape.
Ed was using it. Ed used up all the.
They would grug the men with a G, grug, and then would rape them, and then would have their way, and then K them. Yeah. And that was a whole culture of women that would do this in that time, during that time, the whole biblical time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some examples like that of like, but I bet it's not very common. I don't think matriarchal cultures are trying to emasculate the men or kill the men or dominate. I just don't think that's what it's about. I think that Native Americans certainly didn't do that. They don't want weak men. They just want the men to not be like, not be assholes. And just be respectful. I don't think these matriarchal cultures are trying to like emasculate the men or make the men weak or servile or any of this stuff. I don't think that's what women want out of men. I think women want strong men. They want men that can fight for them. They want men that can defend them. They want men that can go lift heavy stuff and bring back heavy rocks. Like they don't
not just that.
Men.
Protect them. Protect
them.
And to dialogue and to work together in the mind too. Not just like we're doing right now.
Right. So I don't think the matriarchal cultures, like they had warrior, like you can have warrior women doesn't mean you don't have warrior men. Like the Amazonian women fought alongside their husbands. They went into battle with the men, like alongside their husbands and brothers. The women that wanted to fight, not all women did it, but the women that wanted to, they were capable of it. They weren't like a bunch of lesbians. They were, they were fighting alongside the men.
Right. And I wanted to add this, though. With me, I know today, and Brother La, I think you're talking about Ed's book, where he's going to show us again. It's, A History of the Goddess. Let me put you on the big screen here. A History of the Goddess from the Ice Age to the Bible. From the Ice Age to the Bible. It is available. Edward Dodge, get this book. It is great. It's a great read. It's a great resource. You can get it on Amazon. You can, it's on the Substack. Huh?
You can get it on Amazon.
Yes, that's where it's most popular. That's where I got it. I have it. I was going to get it, and I was like, where's that book, God? But I didn't have a lot of time when I got home. I was rushing. But definitely. I want to say this. From a modern standpoint, I will speak for what I want, because I was always talking about, I'm pro-patriarchal. I was always pro women, the hierarchy of man-led home, women submit to their husbands. I've evolved. I haven't let go of those standards because I was raised that way in a home like that. But I've evolved to say, but you need good leaders. Every male can't be a leader. You have to know the worth, and you have to respect the feminine power. They hate that word. Those two words together, everybody says, she's a feminine power. She's a feminist. She's a misandrist. No, you got to respect the feminine power. And it is the original power.
Yeah. Yeah. For Native Americans, the way they choose the tribal chief is that it was like the council of women that would choose which man they wanted to be the chief of the tribe and the spokesperson for the tribe. But he's chosen by the women. And then the people democratically say, give their consent. So people think that the Native Americans are patriarchal because they see a chief, a warrior chief, but they don't realize how the guy got the job, or the fact that he doesn't really have any real power. Like, he doesn't have any coercive power. He doesn't have like a bunch of policemen following him around. He can't boss anybody around. Like, you literally, a Native American tribal chief doesn't have any power to like really boss anybody around. He's just like a spokesperson. He's a wisdom guy. He has the power to like be like the father, but like he doesn't have like the power to arrest people or anything like that.
Right. And Ed, are you familiar with the because you brought up the Amazon women? I want to get a picture of you're familiar with the history of did you see the Woman King, the tribe of women warriors, the Maasai? I believe they're
from Africa.
Wait, no, not the Maasai. My gosh. Oh my God. In Benin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's a bunch of them. The one I'm talking about is the Scythians that fought against the Greeks, that were the nomads, that were really like around for a long time. They were the nomadic steppe people from Eurasia. They're in the Bible. They interacted with all the Mesopotamian cultures. They interacted with the Greeks, and that's where the Greeks told the stories about what the Greeks called the Amazons. But then you got Amazon tribes from South America, which is like an entirely different thing. But they also have women warriors. There was ones from Libya, in North Africa. There were also had women warriors.
I'm surprised you didn't see don't tell me you didn't go see the Woman King.
Yeah. I didn't see the movie.
How could you not? You're letting me down, Ed. You go.
What's her name? The actress?
Yes, you have to see, because it's a true history of the Dahomey, the women of Benin, the king had a group of women who were the fiercest warriors, like the embodiment, like the manifestation of Sekhmet and all those great goddesses, Anat, that you talk about. Right. These women were real women. How could what?
I just didn't see the whole movie. Gaddafi had, in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, he had a whole like platoon of women soldiers that
they make Gaddafi's women look like babies. Go, a man who is talking about the feminine divine and the power of the women. You gotta see not just the movie. Find out about the Dahomey. I'm gonna see if I can get some more pictures for you.
It seemed like a very Hollywoodized version. Is it good though? You're telling me?
It's pretty accurate, actually.
Okay.
There's a lot of books on it. It's very famous. I mean, we have if Genesis is still up here, Genesis, you should know the history of this.
Now that you recommend it, I'll watch it. I'm
you gotta see it.
So much Hollywood's crap.
And before you do it though, just read a little history on the Dahomey, the women warriors, and then when you watch it, it's so much more enriching. Did you want to add about that, Genesis? Because I know that Genesis is actually a Santeria priestess, so she studies a lot about dare I say it's voodoo or West African spirituality, Ifa. Do you have anything to add about these women? Are you familiar with them?
Yes. So even in Ifa, you have the warrior priest, right? So even as me, as a priest of Oya, right, I'm considered a warrior, right? So I fight alongside of Shango, who is the owner of thunder. Oya is the owner of lightning. Oya goes out before Shango does and cuts everybody down, and then Shango cleans up. So that's a well-known story in the African story about like Shango and Oya, that she stole like lightning from Shango, and he still has thunder. But this is like really about like nature too. But there's certain type of women, right, that are like your ride or die types of women that are more warrior-like versus matronly, homely, taking care of the kids. You have like certain women, and that is really talking about archetypes. So when you actually go into R.I.S.E understanding, they outline the archetypes of human beings. So
great.
And as a practical matter, like when you're living in a matriarchal household where the women are all sticking together, you got some girls that are happy to stay back with the babies and watch their sisters' babies and their cousins' babies. And there's other girls that are like, rather not. They'd rather get out of the house. They don't want to be stuck with 3-year-olds.
Right.
So you got all lots of different women out there with different types of personalities. And so you've definitely got some women. You look at modern women athletes that can totally run with the men. They can totally be warriors. But they're not all women. It's just a certain fraction of women.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I see what you're saying, brother-in-law. They're called the Bachaha. It's Bachehha, maybe. They're the children, sadly, of Afghanistan who are being dressed as women, and I don't want to take it there right now, but yes, that's what they're called, the Bachaha. It's in Afghanistan. Okay, so I want to read
the female queen, right, would be a similar thing to Oya. So really, that whole
right. Wait a minute, hold that thought. I want you to just hold that thought. No, go ahead, because you were explaining. Oh yeah, I wanted to.
So that story really about the feminine queen in the Dahomey thing is a Oya story about a woman who is like the queen warrior and is able to fight amongst the men and even like be better than the men in war when it comes down to war.
Right.
Also the owner of the marketplace, things like that. And you see that, she probably loves like the great looking guy and he's whatever, and he loves her, but he's probably more attracted to the beautiful woman, right? So there's like this whole like archetypal battle between this type of woman versus that type of woman.
You're talking about the spirituality. I was going to actually go into, I just want to make sure that we're making a clear distinction. So she's breaking down like the more philosophical side of it, but this was actually a troop of women who fought for the king. She's going
right. I'm sorry, I went deep into it, but yeah. There's a whole type of woman that actually will fight and go into battle and like be kind of masculine. They actually might even grow beards.
Yeah.
Oh shoot! I didn't know about the beards. Please don't. Yeah, they might have. These are trained to be ruthless killers. The Dahomey, they call them Amazons, which is a misnomer. Dahomey Amazons struck fear into the heart of the 19th century colonizers. These are the women that actually, by the way, you got to find out more about. Ew, sorry about that. These are the women who, when the Portuguese came and they were coming to enslave Africans, they were set out, and the king is like, okay, what should I do to the general, basically? And they're like, we will fight them. We'll do anything you want us to do, king. And they fought to the death for their people. Now that's kind of in the movie. You're gonna cry. I'm sorry to think about the movie. Oh God, it's so babe.
It's so the ride or die. It's the ride or die, man. The person is like, listen, you fixing the fight, I'm about to jump into it. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna fight with you. Let's go.
Right.
Who
said
what? Let's go. What?
Right. So the thing is to take it back full circle and get back to you, and you can do a closeout, Ed. It's like when you look at what's going on with the climate today, when people saw this movie, mostly men, they hated it. They said so many negative things, like, how could you call this the woman? That's a title, the woman king. And the background that Genesis just gave you on it, the spiritual background with that culture and that with Ifa and the religion. But the modern males, a lot of them are very, very offended. And then that you look at that and you go, okay. And I also want to tie it in and hand it over to you, because I know you have an affinity toward Hinduism. With Kamala Harris, how people were like, I will never vote for her. I don't care if Trump, I know Trump hates. I mean, we had Latino males, immigrants voting for Trump. We had Black Hebrew Israelite males voting for Trump. That's like their arch nemesis. You understand? So all because the whole idea of a woman leader, a woman king. Oh my God. So I'm going to hand that over to you. I hand that over to you, and you can get your commentary on that.
I'll just make one last. I don't have anything to say about. I'm not going to get into politics, but
you're already into politics. You're just going back.
There's one more famous Amazon warrior queen that's relevant to the Bible, which is, if you know Cyrus, who's the great Persian who overthrew the Babylonians and released the Jews out of exile and let them go back to Jerusalem. And Cyrus the Great, who was a real figure. He was eventually killed by an Amazon warrior queen, a Scythian queen, because later on in his career, he went up to fight the Scythians and got into it with them. And he went up into their lands and killed the queen's son, who was like the general, and Cyrus killed him in battle, and so the queen was just like furious and upset, and but Cyrus wanted to conquer all of them, and what the Scythians would do is, since they were nomadic, they would just retreat farther and farther back up into the steppe, like up around the Black Sea, and like drew the Persian army into their lands, and then they circled around until they slaughtered them all, and killed Cyrus. And so Cyrus, the Amazon queen, took his head as a trophy and kept it in a bag of wine. And that's it's the same Cyrus the Great that led the Jews back to Jerusalem for the second temple. His head ended up in a bag, kept as a war trophy by this very famous Scythian queen, who was a very real person. And then the Persians hate that story, and so they like to deny that ever happened. It's very controversial from history.
There's something similar to that in the Bible, but it's not Cyrus. It's David.
That's not from the Bible. Cyrus is in the Bible, but not his death.
No, not his death. No, but I'm saying that you can see so much of the similarities, like the basket, the head brought to King David in the basket. But anyway, this was great. I forgot I feel bad. I have a friend who said, "Oh my gosh, when he comes on, please let me call me and let me know so I can come in and ask him some questions." I just remembered I was supposed to call. I'm sorry. I'll have him on next time. You know who? She might not want me to say her name, but thank you, Jose. Is there anything you want to say before I let Ed do his closeout? I appreciate him being here.
I think that we need to explore a little bit more what a woman king is, because they still do that today in Africa. They have women who dress up who are regents. They dress up as men because they act instead of a king. You know that, right?
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, I was reading that they say when a king dies and they have a regent who's a female, they will put her to dress up as male because she's acting as a king, which is what happened with her. She
pre-colonial times or like now? Like, I'm not familiar with any kingdoms since Haile Selassie, but anyway, I think that's interesting.
That is what happened with Hatshepsut. Because she was acting as in a suit, she had to act as a man. That is why she just acted as a man.
I don't know if she acted as a man or just wore like certain ceremonial.
But hold on, I'll say this: even with Hillary Clinton, right? They made her use her voice lower. She had to wear a certain kind of suit because men don't trust women.
No, I mean that's definitely true. That a lot of men do have trouble. I mean, sometimes you see him, Margaret Thatcher, and we'll get a woman president one of these days.
One of these days, if we make it through these 4 years. Oh my Lord! Woo!
They have a tradition in African culture that if she was acting as a king, she had to dress and act that way.
Well, I believe you. I know that she did wear the royal beard, that I forgot what it's called. Yeah, but you're saying she dressed as a man and acted as a man. That show me where that is historical, because that doesn't. Nothing in history says she acted as a man.
When I say they knew that she was a female, but because she was a king, she had to attire herself a certain way. That is why they show you her dressed the same way that a male would be dressed.
Well, you mean the beard?
The beard, the what they call the kilt, everything.
Right, but we understand that those are depictions that she did. There's nothing we got to talk to Jabari or somebody because there's nothing that said she was transvestite.
I didn't say she was trans.
Well, you see, she acted as a man.
She did, but that is the way she dressed. It wasn't just a depiction. She used to dress that way.
Okay. Well, we
even with Hillary Clinton, like they make her listen. Whoever was running her said, "Listen, talk in a lower voice, like a lower register, a deeper voice." That's well known about how when she was actually given, she's not up here like I'm Hillary Clinton. No, she's like, yes.
Where did you get this information, though?
That is well known throughout politics. That
I mean, but I know, but I get it. Both of you I get what you're saying. I agree that you can't come in like, "Hey guys, I'm so feminine. Do you want to elect me as president?" But when you say she's acting as a man, like scratching
I
her,
wouldn't say that she's acting like a man. What I'm saying is that
Wearing
there
pantsuits.
are marketing wise, what
Never seen a
happens
skirt.
is they'll say,
I'm not-
okay,
I'm not
wear a
agreeing with
blue
Genesis about the book.
jacket,
I heard that.
talk in a lower register, speak in a
No,
lower.
I'm not saying that you're wrong about that. I just said I just wanted to know where I could find that information. I'm not saying that's not true.
I can like get it for you.
Right. And then he's saying something different
I don't know
though.
where she got that from. I never heard that.
Yeah, I know from what I've studied
She's
on
saying
Haps.
different from what I'm doing.
Yeah, from what I've seen on Hatshepsut or Hatshepsut, she was a clear woman. She had
So who is this? What era are we talking about?
I think it's the 18th
We know she was a woman.
dynasty.
We know that.
18th dynasty. Let me double check. I don't.
No, she was a woman.
Ancient Egypt.
We're talking about Kemetic. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, Hatshepsut was definitely a woman. We know that. History tells us that, but because of the cult, she acted and dressed as any Nasut would. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Nobody said she was a trans this and a trans that, and no, nobody did that.
She was
was there many female pharaohs? We had Cleopatra. Was there many others?
Well, no, just her. And then there's a debate out there that possibly, I don't want to get into my theories, but she was.
I think they have a couple of others too. They have a couple of others besides her too.
Well, the main pharaohs. Who else? Jose?
I think there were others, but I believe Hatshepsut would have been the most well known. I don't think.
Right, and then we have Queen Nefertiti, who was the wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten, and she ruled. And also, Queen T actually helped rule. She wasn't officially pharaoh, but they had a lot of power.
But Hatshepsut took power because she got tired of marrying. Apparently, she took power because she got tired of marrying off her female relatives to all these men. That is why she took power.
All right. Well, see, this is the issue that I have, and I'm going to tell you why I'm giving them some pushback. For her to be able to, this is why I push back. There's really nothing in history that's significant to say she acted like a man all the time. There may have been royal processions and events and then depictions of her in the garb, the actual 100% dressed as, the royal pharaoh. But the pushback is because so many men want to take that and say, well, she had to be like a man for her to rule. But there's nothing saying that she had to be like a man for her to rule as pharaoh. She was clearly a woman. She behaved as a woman. She was treated, no one said, oh, it wasn't like, how do you say, what's that movie with Julia? Oh my God. From the Sound of Music. Y'all remember? She was like acting as a man.
But you need to, I think you need
Victoria.
Victoria. Yes. I like that movie. Yeah, it wasn't Victoria.
I think you should read a little bit more about the African culture.
I should learn a little bit more about the African culture.
Understand why you did that.
Because Ed was saying, and so was Genesis, who studied this, that the mother in the African culture, and there was a lot of matriarchal societies, mother-led, woman-led. So there would be no reason for her to act like a man. I get what you're saying, but I have to make it clear. She didn't act like a man at all. Show me, source up real quick. Source.
I said.
Show us where it says she acted like a man. Besides the beard, we already know that she dressed as a man at times. Wait, she didn't even dress as a man. Stop. She dressed as the pharaoh. So now show us where it said she acted as a man.
Okay, maybe
where she moved through her daily procession and pretended to be a man.
Maybe I'm overstating and I'm using the wrong.
Thank you. You're right.
Maybe
you are
I'm using the wrong word.
You are.
She acted as a man in her office. Let me say it that way.
Okay, perfect. You mean a pharaoh?
Yes, she acted as a man in her office. I didn't say.
No. You mean she acted as the pharaoh, the king, right?
Hello.
Yes.
See what we have to deal with, y'all?
Yes, she would have been considered. She would have been. Well, I don't like the word king. She would have been considered on the
How
show.
much
I
is
don't like the
funny?
word king. Because I
Wait,
think
you're not muted, Genesis. What you say, Jose? And then I'm gonna let you go. Do
she,
you get
she,
the last word, Jose?
she was in
Because
the show.
I know how fragile the male ego can be.
I
Go
don't like
ahead.
the word king. I don't like the word king. I would say
I
Miss
know.
Suit.
I know.
I don't
We're
like
gonna get those kid gloves on for it all. Come to us, my son, my little fragile male. It's like we're talking about
Nepal, why you
the
attacking
way
me?
men are with
Nepal,
the
why you
with
not?
the.
Nepal, why you attacking me?
I'm
Why
not
you wrong?
attacking. I'm not attacking
I'm
you.
feeling
You came
attacked.
in. You're said this is an attack.
I'm feeling a little attacked, but maybe it's my fragile male ego.
Yeah, I like you, Jose. I've always loved you. And with that said, everybody do your research. Yes, Hatshepsut, that's a tongue twister. She did wear the pharaoh attire, which was male, but to say she acted as a man and was like a man so she could become pharaoh, I think that's a little
I didn't say that.
misleading.
I didn't say that.
Okay, we got it. Thank you. Thank you. And we need to talk to Jabari about this. That's who, no one else can cover that besides Jabari. No one else claiming to know Kemet could get really into that because Jabari is, you've sat with Jabari, Ed. He's so balanced. There's not even an inkling, not a minuscule amount of male bravado or chauvinism in him at all. I'd say that for you too, Ed, but you said something earlier that Genesis and I was like, what? But anyway, I'm just kidding. don't you get fragile. Let me get my male kid gloves back on for these two.
Don't get fragile.
Okay, guys.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you, Jose, for bringing that up. And never attack you. I never attack you. I just had to give you a little pushback. You know, this is girl power.
Ooh,
All right.
power.
Peace to you, Jose, Genesis, Ed, Dodge. One more time, hold your book up for us. And I tell people, please go get this book. Ed, Jose, brother-in-law, all the women, of course, in the audience. A History of the Goddess from the Ice Age to the Bible. Yeah, we need a part 2 on that one, by the way. We need a part 2. Aren't you working on something or no?
Nah, I'm kind of retired from the writing, actually. I think this would be my one and only book.
That's your opus magnum.
Happy to talk about it, though.
Yes, I love it. I got to bring you back. Do a little research on the beer, and I'm serious, a little bit more, because I should send you my long, boring. Let me tell you real quickly. When I did the documentary, I was really engulfed into and dedicated to the Hebrew Israelite religion. So I had to pretend to be. I had to do what Jose said. I had to act like a man, and I was called Phineas the Zealot on my channel. So all of it is everything I wanted to say is all subtitled. I'm not subtitles, but all the commentary is written. It's so annoying. So I got to do it again. But anyway, in the documentary, I go way back about pizza. Pizza is tied to beer and the worship. You'll see. The milk,
pizza and beer, back to the beginning of the Neolithic. I believe it, man.
Isn't that wild?
The cheese, they got the bread.
I love beer.
The cheese is the milk, and wait till you Moloch. Hello, Moloch, MLK. That's the milk.
Malt liquor.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Malt liquor. Malt liquor.
No. Well, okay, we're going a little far.
Child sacrifice stuff.
Being silly, I don't know.
With that said, we're going to end it on the malt liquor, but we will do. I really do want to do the beer because have you heard about the hymn? I know I'm going back. I'm not trying to read. Did you hear about the hymn to Inky when I told you about the beer recipe, Ed? You've heard about it?
Pull that up.
It's a beer.
You want me to pull it up right now? Should I get it? It's really
I gotta go.
All right, yeah, me too. Yes. Okay, Ed. Thank you. Peace to everybody. Peace and love to the chat.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Recipe.
We need to explore that woman king a little bit more in the park. We need to.
You see how he had to
watch the movie. I'm gonna watch the movie.
Go watch the movie.
The next Netflix movie.
You got to watch it. It's part of your research. Peace, everybody.
All right.
It's a beer recipe.